it in the meantime. Okay, sorry about that. So when we start our lesson with starter activity, there's one thing that we're always trying to achieve, okay? And let me just share my screen. There's one thing that we're always trying to achieve with a starter activity. And that is our primary goal is to engage and motivate and settle the class. That they should come into class, the students should come into class and immediately have something to do that is exciting and engage them and engaging, and that they want to, so that they want to learn, that they're busy straight away and interested in what's to come. And there are a few things that need to be present in order for this engagement to happen. So number one is all students are going to need to be involved. And by the way, feel free to take pictures on your phone if you want to take notes of this. So all students have to be involved. If the starter activity is a dialogue between the teacher and two students, okay, the teacher's asking questions and two students are answering, so then not all students are involved, right? And then it's not engaging for everybody. It has to be appropriately challenging. If it's too difficult, so it's frustrating and it's demotivating, and again, it's not engaging. If it's not challenging enough, so it's also not engaging, it's boring, right? It needs to be well planned with clear instructions. If you have to spend the first 5 or 10 minutes explaining how the activity works, so that's not going to settle the class and engage, they're going to lose interest by that point. Okay, and part of having clear instructions is having clear expectations that, you know, I want you to come up with 3 reasons for or 2 answers to this question, or I want you to write down 1 sentence to explain why. Okay, and also a starter has to have a good sense of pace. It has to be short, otherwise number 1, it's not a starter, and number 2, also you don't want it to outlast the attention span of the student. So these are the things that are always going to have to be present, and the starter activities that we're going to talk about tonight are going to include all of these elements, okay? They are all going to involve all students, be challenging for every child on their level, be clear and easy to work through, okay, and be short with a good sense of pace. And in this way, they're going to engage and motivate and settle the class. But then there are some other aspects of a starter activity that we're sometimes trying to achieve, right? Not every single time, but sometimes trying to achieve depending on the lesson and depending on the starter activity. So, for example, sometimes you're looking to pre-assess students' knowledge and identify if they have any misconceptions about material before you begin. For example, the start of a new topic or a new unit. I once watched a class on Parshas Zachar. It was a high school class, and it was a very complicated lesson on the concept of memory, on the concept of why remembering things is important. It was halachically complex. What to do if there's no Sefer Torah at Parshas Zachar. Okay, it was a complicated lesson. And about 2/3 way through the lesson, the teacher realized that the students had no idea what Parshas Zachar was, which was surprising because it was a high school class, but the students had no idea what Parshas Zachar was. So the whole learning up until that point had been lost. So a simple activity at the beginning of a lesson can help identify if there is anything that needs to be explained before we can move on to the next thing. We also, at the beginning of a lesson, sometimes we want to review what we learned yesterday or assess how well they know what we learned yesterday, okay, to bridge it to the learning of today. Sometimes we're looking to create awareness of the learning outcomes, which means based on this starter activity, what do we want to learn? What do we need to learn? What do you think today's lesson is going to be about? Let's be curious about the learning that's coming on today based on what we've just discussed. Okay, so for example, if we sort a set of moral dilemmas, honesty moral dilemmas into what's okay and what's not okay, well, today we're going to be learning some halachas and hashkafa about honesty. And sometimes we're looking to practice a skill by practicing it for a small amount every single day, like shirashim or prefixes or suffixes, okay? Every single day we practice a little bit, or a few times a week we practice a little bit so we get good at it, but also in a way that's engaging, that involves the whole class, and that helps them settle down. So this is what we're talking about today, okay? So all of our activities, we're talking about 4 activities, they're all going to have the elements in the blue box, Okay, they're all going to be challenging, clear, short, engaging, involving everybody. But some of them are going to be better for assessment, some of them are going to be better for practicing a skill, some will create awareness of the learning outcomes, and so on. So that's the plan for today, for this half hour. Okay, so number one, the first activity that we're going to look at is called Odd One Out. This is great for a pre-assessment, okay, at the beginning of a unit. It's also helpful to review yesterday's learning and to assess what was done yesterday. It can also be practice a skill, and I'll show you how that works. So I wanted to ask you to post in the chat, but the chat isn't working. I don't know why. Okay, so let me ask you, it's not such a massive group. You can unmute yourselves. Which one is the odd one out and why? Shabbos, Chanukah, Yom Kippur. Which one would you say is the odd one out and why? Let's have some suggestions.
Shabbos.
Why Shabbos?
Not a Yom Tov.
Not a Yom Tov, okay. Someone else said Chanukah, why?
Because Chanukah is not in the Torah.
Chanukah is not in the Torah. Anything else?
Yom Kippur.
Yom Kippur, why?
Fast day.
The fast day, we can't eat. Shabbos and Chanukah, we eat a lot. Anything else?
Shabbos and Yom Kippur are the same. Yom Kippur, Shabbos, Shabbosai. So
Exactly, Shabbos and Yom Kippur are both called Shabbos. So you see the idea? You put up 3 words on the board, and this is something that can be done in a lower elementary class with pictures if they can't even read yet, okay? It's something that can be done, and I'll show you other examples for how it can become more and more sophisticated. But you can have lots of answers to one question, and brains get buzzing with this, okay? And you have lots of suggestions and lots of answers. And you can ask the students, can you write down how many suggestions can you come up with? What's the maximum number? And you might get some silly ones, like Yom Kippur has 2 words in it, or I don't know, which is fine, as long as you also have some other good suggestions, some good answers, right? But you can ask them to think, how many can you come up with? Can you do this in partners? How long a list can you make? Can you do this on your own? How many can you write down? Or can you think of a minimum of 2? Okay, another example. Rus, Yisrai, and Rachav. Odd one out.
Yisro.
Yisro, why?
Male.
Male, and the other 2 are female. Okay, again, beginning of a unit, review in the middle of a unit. Okay, so Yisro is male, other 2 are female. Any other answers?
Yisro doesn't start with a resh.
Yisro doesn't start with a resh. Okay, great.
Yisro's in the Torah.
Sorry?
Yisro's in the Torah.
Yisro's in the Torah, and Rus and Rachav are Nevi'im and Ksuvim, absolutely.
Rachav.
Why?
The other 2 are Gerim.
Rachav is also again.
Rachav
Rachav converted, that's why I put them all up. Rus didn't make a declaration of Hashem Hu Ha'Elokim when she became a Gyaris. Yisra and Rachav came to Judaism, to Yiddishkeit, in this, wow, we just saw and heard and we know so much about Hashem and we want to be Jewish. Rus actually came to Yiddishkeit through her chesed to her mother-in-law, okay, through she didn't want to leave Naomi, which is a whole topic for discussion and opens up a whole can of worms and a whole, you know, an understanding of why chesed is so fundamental to belief in Hashem and so on, but we get to it through this activity, okay? Another example, Rus and Rachav had very illustrious grandchildren after they converted. Yisro we don't hear much about after he converted. Rachav had children who were Kohanim and Kohanim Gedolim, okay, and Nevi'im, and Rus was the grandmother of Dr. Melech and Mashiach. So there are again lots of ways in which children can think about this. Okay, let me up it one more level. This is an example for a high school Chumash class where we've just taught the pasuk of Lo Sakal al Cherish, that you're not allowed to curse a blind person. And the overarching question that all the Mefarshim ask is, you're not allowed to curse anybody, so why does the Torah just warn us about a blind person and a deaf person, blind person that you can't put a stumbling block in front of, right? Why does the Torah give us a specific warning about them when you're not allowed to curse anybody and you're not allowed to trip up anybody? So say, for example, the students have learned the answers of different Mefarshim in class. Next lesson, okay? we put up 3 Mefarshim, the Ibn Ezra, the Ramban, and the Rabbeinu Bachya. Now, this is terrible, okay? The optics, this doesn't look right. If I was giving this to a class, I would just give them the Hebrew if I taught it, or I would just give them the English based on where they were at, okay? And it would be nice and it would be clear. This is a lot of text on one page, I know. But look at it anyways. I'm gonna give you a minute, and then let's discuss. Then maybe you can suggest which one of these is the odd one out.
Aye.
Again, if this was in a classroom, you would have learned it, you'd have immersed yourself in it, you would know the answers well, right? Any ideas? Okay, so we're a little short on time.
Ibn Ezra's the odd one out, I would say.
The Ibn Ezra, why?
The second two are more giving advice for yourself, how to, why you can't do it, you know, how to better yourself afterwards. The first one is more factual.
So almost, I would say the Ramban also is concerned. The Ibn Ezra and the Ramban are both concerned about the blind or the deaf person who's vulnerable, and that the Torah is looking to protect them. Whereas the Rabbeinu Bachya is very clear that it doesn't, the Torah is not worried about the blind or deaf person. They're not necessarily going to be affected. The deaf person doesn't know that you've cursed him. The Torah is worried about your midas, that you shouldn't become a person who curses. So Ibn Ezra and the Ramban are concerned about the victim. Okay, Rabbeinu Bachya is concerned about the perpetrator. You shouldn't be the one who is a cursing person who speaks this way to another human being. Okay, that's one way, one answer. There's another answer. There might even be more. I found 2 in particular that I thought of. Okay, so again, we're short on time. If you would have proper time to do this, it would be a different story, right? So I would say again, the Rabbeinu Bachya is the odd one out. The Ibn Ezra and the Ramban are saying that the Torah needs to mention the deaf person because they're easy targets and they're vulnerable, okay? You have the power to do so, or you're not afraid of them because they don't know or understand, so the Torah has to protect them extra. Whereas Rabbeinu Bachya is saying, no, it's not that. It's that once you're told about them, it's a kal v'chomer for everybody else. If you're told not to curse a deaf person who can't even hear you, so isn't bothered by what you do, kal v'chomer, you shouldn't curse somebody who can hear you. Yeah, you hear the difference? So the Ibn Ezra and the Ramban are saying, they're easy targets, we need to protect them extra. That's why the Torah tells us about them. The Rabbeinu Bachya says, no, it's not that they need extra protection. It's that it's a kal v'chomer for people who can hear. But do you see how you put up 3 Mefarshim that you've learned, okay? Odd one out. They can be simple answers. They could be Pshat and Drash. This is the one that deals with Pshat, and the other 2 are answers of Drash, okay? Or it could be something more complex like this, but you've got your students, and this could also be an activity for the middle of the lesson or for the end of the lesson, okay? But you've got your students super engaged and super focused and super challenged by something that they've already learned. They know these Mefarshim well, but to try and figure out the similarities and the differences between them. And let's look at a few more examples just to see the versatility of how this could work, this odd one out. Okay, so you put up some words on the board. So this is where it could be practicing a skill. Okay, so it could be words you've learned, or it could be random words. Which is the odd one out? You could have a feminine and the rest are masculine. You could have a different tense. You could have a different shirish. Okay, you could have a different kinds of prefix. Okay, you could have a different conjugation, a different binyan. There are so many options for how you could do this, and there could be a lot of answers for each one that you put up. Okay, so there could be 4, 5, 6 answers for this one that I'm showing you right now. You can have odd one out for names of places, okay, for events. Sorry, this is not so much names of places, this is events. Okay, so 3 wars in Novi, for example. Okay, events in Jewish history, which one's the odd one out? But this is such a versatile activity, and you can use it in so many different ways, okay? All different grade levels, all different subjects, okay? And it doesn't take a lot of planning and preparation. It's not complicated to explain. All the students are involved. They're all thinking of answers, and it's engaging, and it settles the class immediately. You put it up on the boards as you come in, and they start working on it straight away. So that's our activity number 1. Let's move on to number 2. So the second one we're going to be talking about is called Concept Cartoon. This one is good for pre-assessing knowledge, okay? And also for creating awareness of outcomes. Based on this, what do you think we need to learn about today? What do you think we're going to be learning about today? What do you think we should be learning about, okay, based on this? So let me show you. And I'm going to start with a secular studies example, just because this is how I came across it, and I thought this was such a brilliant example. You've got a snowman here, and there are 3 cartoon characters discussing what will happen if you put the coat on the snowman. Will it insulate the cold and stop him from melting? Will it warm him, okay? Or will it not make any difference? And I still don't know the answer. I should Google it. But it's a fantastic activity because you start wondering about this and thinking, what actually is the right, how does this work? What's going to happen? So let's look at some examples for Kodesh. So you've got a girl here who's really anxious for her final, and 2 people giving advice. One says, you'd better study hard, and one says, just rather say to him, it's all in Hashem's hands anyway. So you put this up in your class and you get a whole discussion going before you begin the lesson on what's Hishtadlus and how much Hishtadlus do we have to do anyways, and what kind of Hishtadlus is the best kind of Hishtadlus davening, or why should we, Hashem knows what's going to happen and Hashem decides what's going to happen anyway, so what does it help to study? Shouldn't you rather spend your time doing something different? And we discuss this in pairs, or they write an answer down. You say, I'm giving you 2 minutes to think of something to write down, and they write it down. And then you say, I'm going to call on 3 students to read out what they've written. So that way it doesn't become a dialogue between the teacher and the 2 students who raise their hand, right? But everybody has now written something down, so I'm going to call on anyone to read out what they have written. And everybody is engaged. Everybody has to find an answer to this. And it's short, and it's interesting, okay, and it's not difficult to understand. Another example is the schnitzel shahakol umazonus. Complicated halacha question, right? And you can do this for a lot of halacha questions. So based on this, well, what are the aspects of the question, okay? Why would you think it could be shahakol? Why would you think it could be mazonus? And what do we need to learn, and what questions do we need to ask today in order to find the answer to this question? And what broad halachic concepts do we need to learn that are going to help us answer a lot of questions to do with brachas on food? Another example, beginning of a Navi lesson. Previous Navi lesson, we learned that Yoav killed Avshalom when David specifically told him not to. So today's lesson begins with a breaking news headline. Yoav kills Avshalom. And one person thinks he's a hero, and the other person thinks he should have listened to David HaMelech. What do you think? And your class takes 2 minutes to discuss this. And now based on this, what do you think we should be learning today? Okay, or what do you think is going to happen? Or at the end of the lesson, can you tell me, have you changed your mind about what you thought at the beginning of the lesson based on what we learned in the lesson? So in this lesson, we're now going to learn about David's reaction and the people's reaction and what the response was to Yoav killing Avshalom. Okay, now that we've done this, let's go back to our cartoon from the beginning of the lesson. Do you still feel the same way that you did then? Another example, also halacha, okay? We should give a big donation to 1 or 2 tzedakahs, or we should give lots of small donations to many tzedakahs, which is discussed by the Rambam in Hilchos Tzedakah, okay? So this again opens up a whole big discussion on what do we need to learn? What other questions maybe do we have about giving tzedakah? Okay, so is there priority about who to give to, or which ways one should give tzedakah, the best forum for giving tzedakah? Okay, so first of all, we begin by discussing this question in pairs, or on your own, write something down. okay? And what else do you think we need to learn today in order to be able to answer this question and other questions about tzedakah? And again, come back at the end of the lesson. Based on what we've learned today, have you changed your mind? Do you feel differently? Any questions before I go on? Okay, great.
Yes, I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
Do you have a program that makes these apps that we could use or know about?
No, what this? No, it's not I literally just searched for cartoons and put in speech bubbles. You can probably also just draw it on the board, because if you don't have a smart board, then it's annoying to go through the whole process of putting up an image, right? When you can just sketch it on the board with speech bubbles, I would say. Yeah, I would recommend, that would be my recommendation. Okay, let's move on because I just saw the time. Okay, activity number 3, because I really want to get through all 4 in just half an hour. Okay, activity number 3 is called looping card game, and this is specifically primarily for practicing a skill. You could also use it for assessment, but I would say its primary thing is to practice a skill. Now, it's a little bit tricky to explain over Zoom, and you can't use it on Zoom, I'm just saying, okay? It's a game. So it's a card game, you can't use it over Zoom. So it's a little bit tricky to explain over Zoom. I'm gonna do my best. So just look at these cards for a minute. This is based on pretend class of 5 students, but it doesn't need to be a small class. You could have 35 students and it would work brilliantly. So what you have here, and I'm showing it to you with an example that I would never use, by the way, and then I'll show you because it's just simpler, and then I'll show you how I would use it. So every child gets a card, and on one side of the card is a question, and on the other side, so that's the purple side here, and on the other side of the card, right, but it's a card. It's not they're not next to each other. And on the other side is an answer, but not the answer to their question. So for example, child number 1 has a question, who was the father of Avram? And I'm calling him Avram here, not Abraham, because at his stage when he was described as the son of his father. And on the other side, it's Yaakov, which is not the right answer, right? Every child has a question and an answer. So what happens is you begin with one child. She reads out her question, who was the father of Avram? The child who has Terach as their answer says, hey, that's me, Terach. They then read out their question, who was the father of Yaakov? The child who has the answer to that question, hey, that's me, Yitzchak, then reads out their question, who was the brother of Yaakov? The child who has that answer, Esav, reads out their question, who was the brother of Rivka? The child who has that answer, number 5, reads out Lavan, and then says, who was the husband of Rachel? Okay, and then the first child, that we loop all the way back to the beginning, and someone says, Yaakov, that's me, and I've already said my question, I began. So you loop through the whole class in this way. Okay, now let me show you how I would use this in a fantastic way. It takes time to make this game because you have to make it carefully that it loops and it doesn't get stuck in the middle, that the last person has the answer to the first question, okay? But once you've done it, laminate it, keep it, you can use it once a week. So let me show you how you'll use it. So this example is for an elementary school, okay? And I'm using it here for family names and suffixes, object suffixes. So Aviha, and then whoever has Aviha is going to read out her father, Achaisi. Says the person who has the answer to that, my sister, Aviv, his father, and so on. And this is a way you can practice challenging things for children every single day. And an exciting way to do this is that you keep a record of the time. So you set a timer, a stopwatch, and you time how long it takes to get through the whole class. And then you make a note of the time. So today we did it in 1 minute and 37 seconds. We're going to do this again tomorrow, and you collect the cards and hand them out again, so it's not repetitive, right? Tomorrow, let's see if we can bring it down to 1 minute and 15 seconds. Okay, and it becomes this like competition where you're competing against yourself, and it's such a healthy kind of competition. Look at another example. Okay, so this is an example of how I would use it with prefixes. Also, similar kinds of level, not very complicated. You can make a few of these, and some days do a prefix one, some days do a suffix one. Or to really up the level for a high school level, okay, you take a couple of shirashim, more complicated shirashim, okay, so I've used shachach and rodapir, and I've given them really complex conjugations and complex suffixes, object suffixes, okay, and possessive suffixes, and this is challenging for students. So vayishkachehu, and he forgot him. Eshkachech, I will forget you. Tirdefim, you will pursue them. Tishkachenu, you will forget us. This is challenging, okay? This is challenging, and this is a great way. It doesn't take long. The first time you do it, you might have to explain it a little bit, but once you do it lots of times, the students are going to be very used to it, okay? And it's a fantastic way to practice a skill and get everybody's brains engaged as soon as the lesson begins, okay? I'm not going to take questions now, but I will leave time for questions at the end because I want to finish our last activity. So that's the looping cards game. And the last activity I want to discuss today is called physical scale. Now, this is great for pre-assessment and for a new topic and creating awareness of outcomes based on this, like with the concept cartoon, based on this, what are we going to need to learn today? I just want to clarify, this is not going to work at all with social distancing, but it's a great activity. So I want you to have it because social distancing is going to go away one day, Mitzvah Hashem. And I'm going to show you how you can do it in a b'diavad way in the meantime with social distancing, but just keep in mind the ideal is with no social distancing, okay? So you write a statement on the board, like, you don't have to worry about what other people think as long as you know that you're doing the right thing. And on one side of the classroom, you stick a paper that says agree. And on the opposite wall, okay, you stick a paper that says disagree. And everybody has to stand up and walk somewhere in the room that reflects their opinion. So if you completely agree that you don't have to care about what other people think as long as you know you're doing the right thing, you stand flat against the wall that says agree. And if you think that you completely don't have to care, that you completely do have to care about what other people think, and it's not enough to do the right thing, you stand flat against the wall, disagree. And if you're exactly in the middle, you stand in the middle of the classroom. And if you basically agree, but you think that there's one, maybe there are one or two situations or one or two reasons to disagree a little bit, you move a little bit away from the wall. And then you ask the students, I see you're all the way at agree. Why do you think so? And you call in somebody else and you say, I see you're almost disagreeing, but not completely disagreeing. Why do you think so? Okay, and so on. And it's so fun, it's so engaging, it gets everybody moving around, and it gets everybody thinking and justifying and evaluating something. How would I do this in a socially distanced classroom? So I would do it with colors. That's why I've got the colors at the bottom here. If you completely disagree, hold up red. If you completely agree, hold up blue. And I'll put this on the board so they can see, right, the colors. I would put this exact image that I'm showing you now on the board. If you're smack in the middle, you hold up yellow, but in order to allow for a little bit more nuance, I'm also giving them an orange option and a green option. So green is you basically agree, but not completely. And you ask them, why do you think so? Justify your opinions. So other examples of how you could use this. Example number 1. To evaluate something. It wasn't fair for Paro to analyze. It wasn't fair for Paro to be punished after his heart was hardened by Hashem. Or Hashkafa concept. More people would believe in Hashem if they saw an open miracle. And again, based on this, what are we going to be learning about today? What do you think today's lesson is? What do we need to learn? What do we want to learn? Number 3, Rechavam. This is prediction or evaluation. Okay, we've just learned that the Rehavam's advisors, his old advisors and his young advisors, both gave him advice on what to do with the people asking for lower taxes. Rechavam should listen to his young advisors, or prediction, Rechavam will listen to his young advisors, agree or disagree. Yaakov took advantage of Esav's hunger, agree or disagree. Honesty is the best policy. Is it always? Are there some situations when honesty is not the best policy? Okay, real thinking skills. Women have a less significant role in Judaism than men. Or Hashem knows what I need. I don't have to ask him as an introduction to a tefillah lesson. So you put one of these up on the board again. You agree, you disagree, you justify your opinion. Okay, why do you think that way? And now let's discuss, based on this, what are we going to learn about today? What do you think we should learn about? So let's just quickly go back, talk about the 4 things that we, here we go. No, sorry, I just want to end off, but I just want a quick summary of, here we go, the 4 things. So we have our odd one out, okay, which is to pre-assess, review, formative assessment. I'm not actually going to go through these because we're now running late. Odd one out. We've got the concept cartoon, okay, which character do you agree with and why? We've got the looping cards game to practice the skill, best with words, can work with any closed questions, but best with words. And we've got our physical scale, agree or disagree and justify your opinion. And that's that, ladies. Hatzlacha for the new year. And I will stay on in case anybody has any questions.
Thank you so much.
Very, very much.
Very much. It was